Hello, everyone, and welcome to another HMG podcast. This episode, we have myself, Daniel, and I'm here with Jacob.
Hello, everybody.
And we thought we'd do a bit of a more relaxed episode this time round. There's a lot going on or certainly coming up in the community for Bolt Action in Perth. There's been a lot of other events happening internationally that we've been watching, like the Welsh Nationals has just finished up and things like that. And there's been a lot of conversation around, effective unit types and things like that. And we thought it would be an interesting topic to actually talk about what are our favorite infantry and vehicle choices and our least favorite ones, the reasons behind those and why we came to those decisions. Unfortunately, Tyler and Gorchin couldn't be with us, but we did get a couple of bits of info from Gorchin. But we also put it out very late notice to our community here in Perth, and we actually got a number of responses that we'll walk through as well. So, what do you think overall in terms of a topic in the timeliness?
This conversation will be very interesting to see what other people think internationally. So if this sparks some conversation elsewhere and more people have their input, that would be amazing. I took the keyword of favorite meaning what I enjoy, not necessarily what is meta, what is strong, whatever else. There are two ways to kind of look at this. If you were to look at this video and then respond to us and let us know what your favorite is based on something that you enjoy using more than competitive, that would be a good counter to see, because typically this type of question is answered in a very competitive manner on, say, a Facebook post and whatever else on what is the best unit I can choose for my list or for my army and all that kind of stuff. I really looked at it in the word of favorite. Other people may interpret that differently, and that's fine. Maybe if we can kind of have the idea in response to this video of maybe putting this in two different angles. One, here's what I like to use, and here's what I can consider as strong.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point to pick up initially. So when we're talking typically around favorites overall, the intent of our question initially is, what do you enjoy playing with? What do you really like? But yes, I do suspect that as the comments start coming in around from other people within our community, we will see certainly some competitive pieces come forward. Whether that be in the like or do not category is probably the difference as well. So, I think probably the easiest one to start with would be my favorite infantry. So my favorite infantry that I wrote down, and I was really torn between a couple of different choices, but the one that I settled on was a Soviet Guard squad. Mm-hmm. Now they are very, so a regular Guard squad is actually very vanilla, like they don't have any special rules. They have a modest, attachment to their kit and what equipment they've got available. But the thing is, they've been the mainstay of my Soviet armies pretty much since day one. Like they're available in most of the selectors, and they're a very solid tool that you can you can configure them a little bit, but you can get them up to 11 men, which always feels like it's a good number to max out, get that reroll on the morale check, the order checks. And they're very resilient because of the national rules that the Soviets use. And so, learning with something like that turned out to be, even for a basic troop type, that was a very rock solid troop type, because you're not having to pay extra points for rules that you really understand. It's a great way to
maximize.
That's right. Yeah. It was, and so what it taught me is how to use the infantry well and not squander what I've got, and it's like your infantry can do quite a lot in the game, being an infantry based game, and you just need to figure out how to unlock it. And so they kind of hold a bit more of that favorite spot out of all the different infantry that are in the game, and there is quite a few now that sit in that space. But what about for yourself, Jacob? What did you end up?
Before we go to that, run me through weapon options that guards can have, and veterancy as well.
Yep. So typically your guards are a regular unit, so don't have veterancy options. They're pretty much just regulars across. If you want the veterans, you go to a veteran squad. But they can take up to 2 Panzerfaust, up to 2 light machine guns. They can take, I think it's up to 3, might even be more than 3 submachine guns. I never ran more than 3 because that's basically what I built the squads as, and so that was it. That was the number as far as I was concerned. And yeah, like it's like 11 guys. It's a fairly solid amount of shots, and you could just cover a lot of board space with them. And that national rule that means that they don't run away as much. Very, very effective. And so we also appreciate that our favorite units might be multi-layered and faceted between army rules, weapon rules, and whatever else is coming to play. But yeah, they're just solid. Like they're very good to work with.
So you typically take them in maxed out squad size, and do you arm them with SMGs and LMG, maybe, or?
Yeah, so I will run them as a full 11-man squad most of the time. And they would even though they're not point efficient necessarily, but I will give them the light machine gun, only one normally.
This is long range pins for the most part.
Yeah, just some long range pins. It helps when you get a little bit closer just to throw some extra dice. Like I enjoy having fun in my games, so I'm not super worried about how accurate those dice are. I just like throwing dice. And then 3 submachine guns is typically what they're going with. Whilst they can have up to 2 Panzerfaust, I normally field 0 and or 1. It depends what other anti-tank is there. But I do find with a light machine gun, 3 submachine guns, and a Panzerfaust, and then you end up with I think it's 6 rifles left over in an 11-man squad. And it's kind of like, it's actually not a horrid unit. 12 rifles has limitations on movement and firing and things like that, where your efficiencies aren't the same. It's like you kind of don't care about that with the guard squad. And then the real big thing is it's easy to keep your special weapons alive when there's 8 other guys around them that are going to get picked off first.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'll go through mine, and mine I foresee is very boring for me because it's something I've consistently taken since I've started bolt action, and it's right at the top of the unit selectors in Germany, so it's not hard to find. And they have versatility is the key word here because they have access to everything. Which is good and bad because it kind of you don't know where to start, and my decision making on where I actually select the ideal squad for Germans is hard, and it's changed over time. I've gone with the late war SS squad, which is not all that different to other late war squads throughout Germany and lots of different selectors and other things. But over time, things have expanded. You can get veteran SS in inexperienced, regular, and veteran. You can opt to add them as fanatics. You can kit the entire squad out with ARs if you want to. You have access to all 10 slots if you need to. Up to 7 SMGs. I think it's 4 Fausts, up to 2 LMGs as well. So you have versatility is there. But yeah, I mean, what's interesting and on how I define how to use them properly is that they will commonly come against squads that have special rules that do have that edge if used well, Gurkhas, etc., and whatever else. But they are cost efficient. You are paying for points to use all those extra options and tools, but they're not. There's no tax to have them as they are. So yeah, for many years I use them full squad, 10 dudes, and then I used to just run a hit squad that would have a lot of ARs, and most of them were riflemen and whatever else. Sometimes I'd swap it out, and maybe I'd have a couple of squads that would have LMGs and let them fill that role. Then I moved down to maybe I just have a 5-man team with an LMG and that kind of thing. But over the years, I can't go wrong. At the moment, I feel that my squad of 8 dudes with a Faust or 2 and 4 ARs seems to work everywhere. it gives me a couple of options, because in the list building, I can start looking at other vehicles for Germany that don't have a main gun that's a tank threat. If all of my infantry are threats to tanks by default, which gives me quite a large frontage to make that a problem. And then, the firepower with a couple of ARs in there really does help. And then I kind of see those extra 4 dudes for the most part as wounds for the ARs, just the generic rifleman. And they have the ability to just move and shoot anywhere on the battlefield. They're not that. I've tried playing around with SMGs in the same role, and I just figure that the amount of reach these things have for the point investment is worth it. And I can't see using anything else. Like, I'd be happy to fill all 5 slots with these and a similar loadout. And it's usually about how many as I can fit in a squad. I tend to not pay the points for fanatics, though. Just not a thing that I do. I do prefer. I
mean, three points a man is it is always that. I play game of 3 points a man is like, actually, you know what? I'd pay 5 points because it was so effective, and the way that the game plays out. And then I've had other games where I'm like, my opponent really knew what they were doing, and they focused fire on the fanatic unit and wiped it out. And therefore, I spent most of the game not getting points back for it. So, fanatic is one of those ones where, like, if it was 2 points per model, irrespective of other things that are obviously in that system, I'm like, 2 points per model. That means you're only talking a certain amount. Okay, so it's like 10 points to give it to 5 guys. You're looking at 20 points to give it to the full 10, and you go, 20 points to basically never run away starts looking pretty dandy. As opposed to the 60 it is. 60? No, 30. 30. Cannot math.
It's all good.
But it's one of those things where it's. The rule is really good. It's like, and heaven forbid anything that gets fanatic for 1 point or free, like in our Japanese army review stuff, is like that's a real good bargain.
Definitely,
really good.
So I mean, that's my favorite, and I feel comfortable using it in many situations. It's versatile. That's my key. But the thing that I'm always jealous of is actually the free inexperienced rifle squad from Soviets, and that's just because most of my matchups is against Soviets.
So you're constantly seeing them pull work in, right?
Constantly seeing them pull miracles. And I actually, so it was, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I was also thinking of that and other inexperienced units, because I actually do like them. I have been experimenting with Ostroop and have been experimenting with a few. There's, for a while I've been doing the medium mortars at inexperienced. I've been even playing around with MMGs, LMGs at inexperienced, and I quite like them for the points that they cost, the order dice, and the psychological. It's a waste of my time to actually engage this unit. I was kind of 50 and 50, but I mean, overall, I use SS squads every game. So, and they're good. They're really good. They've got so much options there, and you do have the ability to go crazy with them, in the sense of you can kit them out all the way, which is unique for the most part. There's a few Soviet squads that can do it with SMGs, but no one can do it with ARs to begin with.
No.
And almost every other selector has a limitation on ARs, like Fallschirmjäger, they can only do like 4 or something like that. So I think that's a very recommend it, but you can.
No. but I do think that's a very interesting point as well, because so favorite units also, as we're looking through the different answers, it's like everyone's favorite units have started as one thing, and as they've used it more, it's adapted and evolved to become something different. Like, I remember when we had a couple of guys who started Germans in our scene, and like the first thing they were doing is like full AR squads. Like that's unbelievably good. And ironically, like AR squads get to a point where you start losing a bit of return on investment, because every model that then dies, you're straight away losing those AR shots as well. But you're getting shot at typically first, so you got to wither a round of fire, unless you're in a transport or something, right? But and so it's kind of like, yeah, you actually do end up having to find a balanced medium of where you're getting the most effective shots without simply just losing them to being shot off the field. But because they will be a target. If you put 10 assault rifles in one unit, they will be a target.
100%. And yeah, I think I've got that happy medium at the moment. I'm paying the same points as one LMG for 4 ARs for a squad. Yeah, I think that's more versatile as the game is right now.
100%.
But yeah.
We might actually touch on that a bit later as well. So we can go through some of the other options that people put forward. I think Gorchin's holiday. Well, not his holiday. He's actually out at work, but he gave us a very short post that was quite direct on this one. So his favorite unit, Marines. Marines are good. Marines have everything, and it's a similar. Yeah. They definitely do, and it's similar to what you were just saying with the assault rifles. They've essentially got not quite an equivalent. You can't give every single man a BAR, but you can give 3 guys a BAR. The rest can take subbies, or the rest can, I think there's an option for them to take shotguns as well. And why would you? You've got the option.
I think Marines actually can have a fairly high count of bodies for the squad as well.
Yeah. I think they're I don't think it's quite as high as 15, but it definitely starts pushing those.
It's over 10.
It's over 10. Yeah, I think it's around 12. It might be 13, depending on the squads. But it's a lot of dudes. And like when you think that the BARs don't need loaders, and so you're essentially like, you don't have to worry about losing shots at the unit. They're a very, very good unit.
Especially fire maneuver and all that as well, which affects the BAR. It's really strong. I like it.
It is very, they're great to see, and they're also like frustrating to see. It's just like, I know that thing's just gonna be like a porcupine of guns, just like they're all gonna go.
It's a shame that it's a shame that it's just the Marines that have all of the options. Because thematically, you want to make... Pacific armies are cool, but also European armies are cool. And it's like, you're taking that selector and you're painting them up as fighting in Europe and calling it a day. But it would be nice if we could have something similar for the normal.
Yeah, it's a bit interesting because obviously the 2 different theaters fought quite differently. And also the Americans in the Pacific theater in the realm of bolt action typically thematically would fight Japanese, and so where you end up fighting a lot more infantry, and they are fanatics, so you kind of want to get those kill conversions.
That makes sense.
So some of those things make a bit more sense of why they would potentially have given it out there, but however, it's slightly superfluous for the point of our conversation, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I'll read Jackson's favorite infantry unit. So Jackson's a friend of the show. He's been featured on the show at least once. We do talk about him quite a bit because he's quite a strong player for Perth. Part of the Monday Nights, one of our rivals. He's picked... let me read from the beginning. My favorite infantry unit has to be any kind of green and experienced rifle squad. So Soviet rifles, Volkssturm, Hungarian replacement division. They're reliable infantry that outperform their costs. They punch above their weight, and they're inexpensive. You can have 2 squads in a list for very little cost, and then build a list from there knowing that you have bodies for objectives. 100%. And obviously that green rule is just so cool. It is really, really good.
It's funny, like, because I absolutely agree with what he's saying. And in fact, one of the units that I was considering alongside my guard squad was the Soviet Free Rifle Squad, because that also, they're actually much more reliable than what people realize when they get started with the game. Because when you get started, you go, they're just free. They killed on 3+. That's horrible. But you don't necessarily actually realize, well, yes, but there is still 12 of them. And they are actually still able to fire and shoot and take part in the combat. And they're not just a bullet shield. You can use them like that. Absolutely, you can. But chase objectives down, put pressure on snipers and spotters that can't really do anything about them. Like, use them to take on fixed weapon teams safely, inverted commas.
And AT grenades, mate. They do
AT
some
grenades.
work. Yeah, they're free.
I was going to say that the best anti-tank grenade is a free anti-tank grenade.
100%.
But yeah, look, I think he's absolutely right. Knowing that you have bodies that you're able to put onto an objective in any given circumstance, and that you didn't spend a lot to get those bodies, and you can put the rest of those points somewhere else. Very valid. Very, very valid. And to be honest, it ties in a little bit to Braden's favourite unit that he put forward for us. Favourite infantry would be Italian black shirts. The reason? Well, they're really like a box of chocolates and you never know what you're going to get, which is very true because the black shirts, obviously, they have a similar sort of mechanic to green where they sort of bounce around a little bit depending on how they react when they get shot at. And when I fought them against them, for example, I think he had 4 squads worth of black shirts plus a Brasiglieri unit. I can never say those unit names, but either way,
we're not Italian.
one of the more elite ones, and like 4 sets of black shirts. And the black shirts just caused havoc because I couldn't get through them, and they all just decided to say, "No, we're not folding." And I was like, "But I need you to fold. Like, we're attacking the Reichstag. I need this army to be out of the way so my force can get through." But no, I think he's right. I think sometimes, bolt action happens, as it's been said on some of the other of our favorite podcasts and stuff. And it's just like, it's one of those things where it's like, you don't necessarily know if that was going to be a wonderful caramel chocolate thing or something you're allergic to. And you have to go to hospital.
You really butchered that one. Gorshin would have came up with some funny, like, Italian chocolates or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, he's not here.
Sorry to everyone at home.
I'm going to go with Nick's choice. So, Nick again, friend of the show, been with us from the very beginning. Also was a cameraman in our first few videos that we've ever shown.
Yeah, right.
And he's picked a unit that I absolutely hate. And that's because he's used them very well. So he says his favorite unit is the Russian anti-tank teams. They forward deploy. They're 2-man, so they've got the small team, and then they've got Panzerfaust and SMGs. But forward deploying, and I've ran into it where it is just a denial of board. I can't advance, I got to hold back and all that kind of stuff. And they're cheap, they're strong. I like them. And you take 3, right? Or you can take up to 3. You take
I think the squad itself can actually. And I think the squad itself, if you so chose, you can actually, I think, purchase up to a 4-man team, which obviously you lose small team, but then there's 4 guys with SMGs nearby. And you would normally leave it as a 2-man team. And honestly, that forward deploying piece is for the missions where you're allowed to forward deploy and you need to get board control for objectives, it is nasty. Even for the fact that they can pop out and just put a pin on you because they're essentially throwing 4 shots off those SMGs. Like, it's
the only thing I can think that would be similar to these guys, just for their role, would be the suicide anti-tanks for Japan, but not everybody's got stuff like that.
No, certainly not every army has things like that. So Australians have forward patrol units, and I think there's a couple of the minor nations that might have, through the theatre books, the ability to ally some of those irregular units that were from local militia, but they're not normally like 2-man teams with an anti-tank weapon, which is
or
what really
slot
or a threat. And that's what makes these guys particularly good. I will admit, I hadn't thought about them as hard as maybe I should have. They're because they are very cool.
They are very cool. Being on the other side of them, it's a mind game of where you go, because it's already mines on the field of where you advance with your vehicles, which are my favorite part of the game. They're more fun.
Effectiveness and fun. It's like whatever. And then one of our last responses that came through was from another one of our local Wargamers, Kane. So typically, obviously, WA Discord chat. Favorite infantry would have to be the US Marine Squad because they are so versatile. They can sit at range with 3 bars or be decked out with close quarter weapons to run up and punch your opponent in the face. And so that's a very similar, very similar piece of what was coming across from Gorchin. And for similar reasons, they're versatile. I've got the weapons that I want. I ignore move and shoot because I'm American. And that's it's a very solid response.
And Kane is a very strong player as well, and is well experienced at fielding US. So if you got multiple people who main US and are good at it, and they're telling you to take Marines, take Marines.
They're saying it for a reason, right? They're not just saying it because they've got models they want to sell you or something. It's
or particularly interested in Pacific. Neither of them are. They both prefer Europe. So, Dean's come in through the last minute, he's got an interesting one. So he's gone for the Soviet Armored Engineer Squad. So obviously they got body armor. You can take SMGs as many as you want. You get the flamethrower. They disgust me, and I love them dearly. That is Dean's words, not mine, but I'm feeling it in my heart.
Oh, that's so true. I mean. And that unit in particular, I think, certainly from like a flavorful point of view, and like their psychological impact on the game when like you're just putting them in body armor and people are like, we're going to shoot with rifles, and you're like, good luck. I mean, it's like,
but we ran through this last time we did our armies of Soviet Union. It can get very expensive very quickly, and you do typically need a transport to use them effectively because of their movement. Obviously they're getting wounded on 6s for small arms, so it's worth it and completely unique. Nothing like this elsewhere. So
it's pretty impressive.
Which not all that bad. I mean, I'm very much a huge fan of transports these days for my infantry squads as they are. So I would be taking them as I would be taking transports with or without armored engineers anyway. So I don't think it's that much of a tax. I think they're a cool unit.
Yeah, no, I think, and certainly when you're turning around to go, we want to see people's favorites units. It's good to see some of those other ones get up there because sometimes it keeps them away from being people's favorite units because they're so expensive at times. And it's like, even if that is the case, like it's okay. It's all.
Hey, but you take that logic, you throw it in with Jackson's, get a couple of inexperienced squads with Soviets, and they're paying for that NG squad. And we brought this all up in the Soviet episode, so go listen to that. Gorchin came up with some disgusting ways of getting the dice count up to here, and the points hadn't been spent yet.
It was, and like he was doing it in his head, and he's like, "Why am I playing any other army?" And it's true. There's some pretty, there's some pretty nasty stuff.
They're definitely good.
And that, when you start talking about, nasty stuff, we obviously did favorite infantry unit, but the counterpart to that is obviously then favorite vehicle under the same lines. Like what do we think is as players that we just enjoy playing that is really good. So what did you end up putting down for your favorite one? I'll cover mine after.
Yeah, sure. So I've got a collection of little vehicles behind me because I like painting vehicles. I haven't been painting infantry at all this year. I've been really burnt out with work and not really doing much hobby, but I can knock out vehicles in no time. So, for example, it's just all various dry brushing to get this kind of effect. It's very similar to the video that Gorchin did on how he weathers his tanks. He did like a tiger in a winter scheme and all that kind of stuff. He kind of got the same dry brushing effect from me. But even without practice and stuff, I can still knock these out in like an hour or so, which is just insane. But yes, this is my choice for at the moment, and the way I describe it is drilling is more fun than the verbal.
Could you do me a massive favor, Jacob, and just pick both of those up and just throw them throw them against the wall behind you.
Oh, wow. So a friend of the show, Lewis, he scratch built me this little attachment for the turret. So thank you very much for that, because it's a little bit tricky to get a hold of. So thanks for that, Lewis.
Yeah, great little.
But, yeah, onto why I like the unit. I mean, yeah, if I've had some great success with this, but it's just way too expensive. And it being open top to begin with for a vehicle at 240 something points. I've gone with the drilling, one less gun, but 100 points less. So
that's huge.
It is. It allows you room to go with other things. Essentially, it gives my list the ability to now take an armored car for the same cost, have two vehicles across the board, the light auto cannons all over the place. Yep. Those AR squads with Faust will take care of the tanks. That's what we do. 100%. I essentially just, at the moment, I'm kind of auto-including the Panzer Shrek as well, with a little Kubel, and he does his thing, goes hunt tank, and these things will just mince up infantry squads. So I'm really happy with autocannon spam at the moment. I like it. I think it's fun. Webel's too expensive. Drilling's more fun, cheaper. Go for it. Give it a go.
That is not the first that I have heard of that comparison. And you know, it's not hard. When you said, you know, 100 points difference, I was just like, I can see why. Like there's because that 100 points easily buys you an armored car, right? And so you can that just gives you some of that flexibility, which is great.
And anecdotally, if you do come against US opponents and you go with drilling as your tank slot and an armored car, you're never going to get shot by a plane ever again. You're just going to take them down every time they come through. And that's happened with me at a few events now where everyone's planes gets deleted. Sorry, everybody.
I do think that the air observers are falling very quickly out of favor for even our newer players that are coming on, where they're just like, but they're cool, and then they see what happens with them in game, and they go, they are cool, but this is not how I want to play. I do feel for one of the gentlemen at the events that we ran in Dueling Aces very recently. He essentially he airstruck himself like every round of in like doubles, and it was like out of the 8 potential airstrikes he could have done, it was like something stupid, like 5 or 6 of them hit him, and I was just like, ugh, that hurts.
That does suck.
But that, you know, we can get to that. That
might be an idea for near the end, actually, to have a chat about. So throw me in vehicles. Is it your crazy heavy howitzer for Japan at like 150 points, or is it something else?
It's not. It's not. So my favorite vehicle, I think, for a long time now, has been the Soviet Su-76, which is a small self-propelled gun platform. So it typically has a light howitzer gun on it. And it's essentially a Ziz-3 cannon, so you can pay for it to become an medium anti-tank gun as well. So medium anti-tank with a light howitzer on a mobile platform. Howitzer means it can shoot smoke. Not that that's worth anything, but it can do it. And its drawback typically is open-topped. However, after a certain period, and within one of the books, you can pay to simply put an iron casing over the top of that, and it's no longer open-topped. So I've played it in both different variants, and it's just again, it's a really fun, solid unit that I've had. Like, it's not a massive, big profile, and so you can actually get some decent cover save and to hit modifiers because you can actually hide it. But it seems to have the perfect blend of, okay, I need to hit the infantry. Light howitzer. Okay, it's only 2-inch blast. It doesn't matter. It's a light howitzer. Like, I can move and fire it, and I can fire it direct. Great. I need to deal with that tank. Well, I can set myself up ready for an ambush, or I can, go out there and try and dance with it. Because on the first part of being, going out and trying to take the shot at it, you're both almost going to be on equal odds if they're in cover and you're in cover. It's sort of the size of your tank and the size of you actually doesn't matter that much. So with good positioning, I was able to get a lot of success with that very, very early. It's a great little unit. It's also one of the first that I really went to town on, like weathering and like it's got camo netting. It's got other bits and things that sort of opened the door a little bit to me experimenting more with my scale model skills or just my wargaming model skills in general. And so it's kind of a favorite vehicle for that reason as well, where it's not just what it does in the game and how it plays, but also it really was something that I pushed to get done. And I'm like, no, I'm going to paint it, make it look good, and do something, try a few different techniques with it. And some didn't work. Like some things I look at and I go, no, I won't do that again. But there are others where I'm like, okay, bit of fine tuning, I can make this look really good on a bigger vehicle or something else with a similar effect. Or if I want to, like the medical gauze netting stuff that I used, I can quite happily run that over some, trench works or something as camo netting over there. I would know what to do with that now. And so from a very different angle to everything we've talked about so far, it does, I guess, similar to your painting where you're like, you can smash them out in an hour. And it's like, for me, it's this vehicle opened up the door on how I do things better and more efficiently. So it kind of holds a special spot in my hobby journey for that reason.
Yeah, nice, man. And 76, very iconic.
SU-76.
Very iconic for the Soviets. So yeah, you would expect to see them on most. Like it should be represented in the game. That's kind of what my opinion is. Let's have a look at what else we have. I'll start with Jackson, and he's broken the rules. He's written an armored car for tank, and then he's given us a tank option as well. So he can have two. So he's gone for the SDKFZ 7/2 with armored cab as his favorite tank. It is hard to kill. For its cost, sub 100 points, and having a heavy auto cannon, it punches above its weight and can handle almost all targets. It's a Nimrod, but better, but Nimrods are bonkers good too. So that's what he's picked. Haven't really played around with single heavy auto cannons all that much. I mean, Germany's got that good option of having that P4 with two autocannons and it's well priced as well. So I haven't done one. I don't know what they're like. But yeah, I'll take Jackson's word on it for sure. And then as for actual favorite tank goes, it has to be the Hetzer. It does everything the Stug does, but cheaper, and it's easier to hide. And I'm a fan of the Hetzer, and we'll get to that in a little bit. I've got a little thing about the whole Hetzer Stug thing, but that was some good picks, Jackson.
I think it's a very good pick. I think that certainly, like the Hetzer does everything that the Stug does, but cheaper and is easier to hide. It's ironically, like in real world scenario, that's what it was actually designed to do, is to be everything the Stug was, but cheaper and easier to hide. And so, that's kind of cool that it reflects, that seems to hold true because of the way the line of sight works and everything. But I remember the first time I versed a Hetzer and I was convinced it was an armored car. I was like, it's just an armored car with a massive gun on it. It's like, that's stupid, blah blah blah.
Yeah, man.
And then of course,
I mean, look at this. It's barely any different to a half track. And then if we get its bigger brother, old Stuggy, it's completely.
I was like,
by the
Now I was obviously educated very quickly on what it really was, but it was. I just couldn't place it in my head because it was so stereotypically unlike everything that I'd seen before, which tells people more about what my historical research was before getting into bolt action compared to now. But that's all right. I think, Gorchin's probably got. Now, before I go into it, if you don't know what Gorchin's pick is, and you're in WA, you probably need to go back and listen to some of our episodes, because it is a Sherman. He hasn't specified. Which type of Sherman or make or anything like that. He's just written Sherman pretty
good.
And
yes,
yeah,
he is a Sherman fan.
He's a massive Sherman fan.
I don't see it.
I did just I did just finish printing off 3 of them from my 3D printed Sherman 5s, and so sort of just working on a few different list ideas for the Spartan tournament that is lifted, and just seeing what I can get in that sort of space. So
3 of them.
That would enable me. Well, it would enable me to run a full tank platoon of 5 of them.
That is cool.
Which I'm just sort of yes and no, because it's a different topic. But
it's cool.
Do I think they're pretty? I don't think they're pretty. I think they're a tank.
Well, okay. It is the iconic tank. If anybody doesn't know World War II or name of a tank or whatever else, you ask them to draw a tank, they draw a Sherman.
Yep, and especially like when you look at kids' toy play sets and things like that, typically it's a Sherman-esque design. Not always. I've seen a few other different ones as well as modern counterparts. But yeah, Sherman pretty. That's a great rationale.
Yep. And it is a medium tank. It's probably sitting at that 230 mark. Heavy gun. It's got the gyros if you take a vet, all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, it's a good option.
It is actually a solid choice. Yeah, we've got Braden with his Italians.
I'll let you read it because I don't know how to say it.
I think I'm going to murder it, so I apologize. But I think it's meant to say the Caro Armato. So
that says it's written.
So I might have said that with more of a different accent than it's meant to, but an M13/40, and so his reason is actually it's actually a great reason, if I'm honest. Once I had a tank. I once had it tank a Sherman Firefly on the side armor, crack it through the front armor, and then in the same game, it survived 2 further shots from a British 25-pounder, one of which was at point-blank range, before it destroyed the said 25-pounder. And it also managed to kill a lot of Gurkhas. And I mean...
I actually think this was against Shadow Lord.
I think it might have been. I don't know if it was...
I actually think so.
Or maybe...
Because he had it. No, it wasn't dueling. It was another one. But anyway, I was. It was his first event. I'm like, just be careful. This guy's really good.
In the nicest possible, like, have a fun game, but be aware. So you know that's fantastic. That's the experience he remembers, is that he had his tank go absolutely crazy.
And this thing is tiny. It's covered in rivets, and it looks like it would have been probably a pre-war tank, but is iconic. It's the sort of thing that Yes.
Yeah. And it's the sort of tank that I look at pictures of and I'm like, I wouldn't want to get in that. Like it looks like the death trap. I'm just like, I don't know if I'd feel okay, especially like. I see all those rivets and stuff and imagine things blowing up, and I'm just like, that's not safe anymore.
Cool. And where are we at? Let's go to Nick. Nick is saying, nice and simple, chaffy, recce, solid AT, amazing pitter kit. Yep, definitely with your
solid.
Nick. Cool.
Solid choice. And then Kane. So Kane's he loves his big tanks, I think. So so his favorite tank would have to be so he's put in for the Yak Panther.
Oh, what a legend, man! And that thing, it is terrifying. It is huge. It's like it's pretty much grab this P4 and grab this Stug and kind of mash them together, and that's about the footprint of what you're getting. It's a big tank. And he's been using it lately quite a bit when he is playing Axis. He's every time I see the Yak Panther, Okay, here we go. Yeah. I don't care that in BA heavy tanks are bad. I have been converted to the heavy tank cult, and they're just fun to play. It also looks so cool visually, 100%. And your winner camo is looking sick, Kane. Good work with that one.
Yeah. And we do have I'd say a splinter faction in Perth who are the heavy tank cult. They're just like they're very much heavy tanks are the way to win games.
Yes.
And the problem is that we let them win, and so they think it's real. I say let them win, but they of course win the games properly. But it certainly is not helping slow them down when they actually are successful with the big tanks.
And keeping in theme with Kane, Dean's answered something very stereotypical of Dean. IS2U, covered in guns, is named after men with the very best moustache of World War II. So Joseph Stalin is the tank's name. So that
the IS2, the IS2 is a big piece of kit. And it causes massive problems on the battlefield when it hits things. Like it deletes, and that's the one that has the bigger HE explosion, I think, or it might be the IS3, but either way, it's still packing a fairly big gun in it, and it's just like you don't want to tangle with it.
If you're not familiar with Russian tanks, this is the equivalent to a King Tiger for the Soviets.
Yeah.
And then Luke's come in last minute, so we're gonna spin back to favorite infantry for him.
Cool.
Just have a look at. Luke does play Germans a lot, so he's got a different opinion than mine. He's gone with the 12th SS, so that's the Hitler Youth Division fighting in 1944 in Normandy. So they have wacky rules when it comes to their aggression. I think it's called Angriff. Can't remember off the top of my head, but it continually pushes the unit forward when they fail morale checks, something like that. Oh, and it's minus. They also are easier to shoot.
They're easier to hurt and shoot.
But they get free fanatics. That's what
they get free fanatics. And so it's a bit of a trade off. It's like you are in that space. So it's like you are going to be able to be hurt quicker and easier because of the way the rules work, and you're going to be forced to run in there and react a little bit unexpectedly, and so they do have a tendency to be like they're not I wouldn't actually think necessarily that they are completely swingy because you don't have your entire army with those rules combinations. It's only some of the infantry pieces, but they're definitely a bit odd. From a rules point of view, odd.
And to correct myself, it's their wound roll that's different, not
their wound roll.
So they go down a veterancy on the wound. They are definitely a wacky unit, that's for sure. And then Luke, let's have a look. Favorite tanks and why? The Fluke Panther, airdropping tanks are very funny, or mouse gaming because he does take a mouse.
Yeah, so we.
Oh my god!
So the Flug Panzer, if it's the one I recall, that's the one they attempted to strap some glider wings to as a. I can't remember if it was a Panzer II, and they attempted to glide tanks in onto a. The plan was to onto a battlefield, obviously, but I don't know if they ever got that far. But yes, the Moz or the mouse.
Comparison's sake, it's like, so here's your hat, so here's your mouse.
And that's not really even an exaggeration. But he has taken that at events, and we have allowed it at events because first of all, Luke's a great guy, so it's like it's like not letting him in would be really sort of poor form. But he also plays it with the attitude of like it's just funny. Like he's not out there to like create or crush people's hopes and dreams or create wrong impressions about it. It's like he knows it's silly. But then again, he walked away from one of the events. He was like, "I was the only person that didn't lose a tank."
Correct.
Because you couldn't actually kill it. So yeah, but that's quite. I'm not surprised that he's put those in.
Yeah, no, that's some good options. All right, so now we're moving into worst options, things that we don't enjoy, things that we think are a little bit silly or whatever else. And this ranges. I think some people have put in units that they find annoying to face. And then I've gone the other route of maybe we should have a little refresh on some of the rules that would make it a bit more fun across the board.
And I think we'll actually see, so we will probably get some element of competitiveness pieces, which we'll talk to, but I do think we've got a mixed views of this simple question, like what do people think when you say the worst unit? What is it that comes to your mind? So, like my worst unit, my first thought was to go to all this, like the spam units and all the the Daka Stewart stuff, and I went, they're not the things that I enjoy seeing in the game, and I went, that's a different question though. To me, that's not what the worst unit is. And so I boiled it down to go, well, what do I think is actually the worst unit? I went, the worst unit would be a unit that isn't worth taking in virtually any circumstance that I can think of, with the exception of maybe simply being there for another dice, maybe. And there's only one unit that I could think of that fits the bill for that, and that is that's a mule team.
Yeah,
right? That's in the campaign book, I think, for New Guinea.
Yeah.
But I would extend it to the horse toe teams as well.
Yeah, so like 7-point toe, right?
The 7-point toe space. The mule is particularly bad because it only moves at half speed and it doesn't have any guns, and it's significant. It ignores terrain, so it will just go 3 inches every turn. But irrespective, it's just slow. So sure, it's a dice. Yeah, okay, fine. But the late FAQ, which we're still waiting on, I think the most recent one from March, but the latest FAQ that dropped removed the requirement to have toes to bring on heavy guns with first wave.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing that, you essentially, for the primary purpose of these horse toes, was a cheap transport option to make sure that your units were never stuck in reserve or off the table and you could bring things on. And when the FAQ went, we're just going to allow people to manhandle them on, I totally understand that it makes it simpler, but you completely invalidated a unit choice. And so when I think about what is currently the worst unit in the game for me, with my view and opinion on it, it's a unit that doesn't have a purpose now. So, and as I said, could skate by and say, well, the purpose is to generate an order dice. And I would say, but wouldn't you rather put like those, say, 7 to 10 points into an upgrade somewhere in your squad compared to an order dice? Now, dicey, maybe not. Maybe the order dice is worth it. But yeah, I'm just like, actually, I think for me, that's the worst unit that I can think of.
Matt is a regular user of mules, particularly for that 7-point order dice, and he sees it as the cheapest way to get an order dice, which it is. So that's its purpose, but it was not. That's more of an afterthought as to its original intent. So I can see where it's useless. In all of this decision making, for the most part, I basically just reserved it to Germans because I know them best. So I went through Easy Army and had a look at the infantry, had a glance through. I'm like, what I typically don't take. I'm like, I don't take this, I don't take that. I'm like, those are good units anyway. Like I didn't, I don't take this because I use this unit that does something similar but has a couple extra weapons or whatever the heck. And I'm like, that doesn't make it a bad unit.
That's it.
So when I started getting into Bolt, when version 2 came out, met you and all that kind of stuff, I went heavy into the DAC, and I went with the DAC because Schützen was strong, but more so I wanted to use the cool motorcycles. And the reason I picked them is because motorcycles don't have, across the board for all nations, if taken in an infantry slot, they can't advance and fire. But DAC, Africa Corps, motorcycles can. I think it's stupid. I think we should just say, that's a good thing. Because bikes are really expensive.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, there are many other fast-moving units within the game, and you can't really kit these out. So the rule is specifically on an advance, the LMG, which is also another 20-point upgrade, can fire.
Yes.
So it's like, I
You-
don't
you're already
see why
having
you
to
want to
prepare.
buy bikes for the most part for any of your nations if you're not DAC. You may as well get a transport and do some other things with it. But yeah, I think motorbike squads altogether need a little bit of rework. Just add that rule in across the board for everybody. It's fair. I think it would be, now it's a unit that you would consider taking, even if it's expensive.
That's right. Yeah, and I think and it comes from the space of, motorbike squadrons. It was a form of transport rather than a form of fighting. So whilst we understand that, the reality is that you've given the rule to somebody else, and now they are just infinitely better for that faction, and nobody else will bother taking them compared to their other options. So, yeah, I can see how that would be not a popular unit choice for you.
Yeah, I mean, well, Germans just have good options all around for the most part. So I was kind of looking at stuff that doesn't make sense. I'm like, it all kind of makes sense. So yeah, that's probably the worst one I can pick.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at what Jackson's got to say. Oh yeah, he's gone for the opposite route. So he's gone for the things I don't like because they're annoying to face, and he's gone worst infantry unit has to be the Gurkhas. Scary Blighters should cost at least the same points as Fanatics, 3 points of man instead of being free.
Yeah, see, that's an interesting one. So first of all, I don't necessarily disagree at all that they are a worse unit to come across, especially because of some of the combinations that have been allowed within the FAQ spaces and sort of stacking effects where you don't normally have stacking effects of rules in bolt action. Cost of 3 points of man instead of being free. Well, free feels wrong. And we've talked about that in the British episode. Whether it needs to be 3 points of man or not, I don't know. There's other rules like Rangers Lead the Way that can be also just be as powerful, and that's only about 1 point a man.
1 point extra. Yep.
Yeah.
And typically, so kind of typically special rules tend to be about 1 point a man for infantry.
Typically around 1 point. Yeah. So I don't know if 3 points a man is necessarily realistic. However, the direction to attempt to pay something for it versus nothing, I would probably agree is the direction. And because, they can be, like, having fought against them on a couple of occasions, I'm like, they can be really hard to deal with. They can be really hard to deal with if you don't. Like, the first time I fought them and I didn't really understand what they did, and I was like, great, he keeps running towards me, this is fine. And then it wasn't fine.
My only other suggestion is open up this particular rule to the other side. Don't put in every nation out there, then everyone's just going to take these. But allies have one option. Axis should make some Japanese unit that could do it, perhaps. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And a specialized one that you can't just take 5 of.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing. Like, if people were only taking 1 unit of Gurkhas, it's probably it's still bad, but it's probably not as bad. But it's because you can take multiples that also it compounds the issue. But we may as well tackle his next worst unit because he still put 2 in, so we may as well tackle the next one as well. So the DAC is Stuart. So for those that aren't aware, there is a Stuart M3 variant that has 5 machine guns and a light anti-tank gun, which can all shoot realistically at the same target at the same time, with the exception of a coax on. So you never basically fire the light anti-tank. You're always firing off. There's like 18 to 20 machine gun shots. It's just needs to be updated because, it just chokes out all the other competition. And I think it means chokes out all the other competition potentially for the slot, not necessarily because you can combat a Stuart. That's not actually difficult. But I think he actually means for the slot. So Jackson, if we got that wrong, then you meant choke out the enemy competition and they just lock things down. can also see that point. But definitely, like, it's really hard to pass up attackers.
Contending that slot, it's a solid choice. I'll have to take over here. We've slipped into the worst tank, which is not what we're doing right now. We're doing worst infantry, so we'll move along with worst infantry with everyone else's faults, and then we'll go back to tank. But yeah, Dakar is a theme. The Dakar Stewart is a theme.
Yeah, it comes up a few times.
So not lost the point. So Braden. I don't know how to say Bersergaleri. Maybe I said it right.
One of the Italian veteran units.
Sure. So Braden says that. Why consistently poor performance? Currently hoping that getting a few on bikes will make them effective, but yet have chance to test the theory. I'm hoping it means motorcycles there.
Yeah, I don't know if
they would have motorbikes, I would imagine.
I don't know if where he says bikes there, he might mean a motorbike unit. I think he was saying that there's a way you can mount them up. I haven't looked at it in detail.
Yeah.
If it was road bikes, I would be concerned because that's not going to make any more effective. Well, sorry, you might get a chance to deploy them in a more positional space, but then you're just getting closer to the enemy. So if you're not supporting them, they're going to get hammered. Especially if he continues to run two flamers in them, for example. Like they will be a target.
Yeah.
However,
forgive me, Braden, I don't know much about Italians. But I know that unit is in Western Desert. I'm trying to log into the Easy Army. It's not letting me log in. Check it another time. But anyway.
That's all right.
Then we'll go to Nick. Short and sweet, but this is lovely. The Finnish jerk flankers for their ability to put bollocks moves. Yep. So obviously they got the advanced ambush move. As far as I know, unique.
Yeah. So I'm unaware of, even with other units that have like behind enemy lines and stuff, it doesn't allow them to come on from the backboard edge in the same way that these Finnish guys do. So it does mean that they're a little bit of a one-trick pony. So if you know you're facing them, like, you could potentially work around it. But yeah, they're pretty. I mean, they're expensive points-wise. Like, I think they're upwards of upwards of 18 points a model. But even so, they're particularly they're particularly nasty.
They are nasty.
And so that's a worst unit from a point of view of it was pointed at me and I didn't like it.
I like Kane's here because he's got a little bit of a flow and a story to it. So worst unit that I would have to go for would be the Pia. If you know, you know. And if you don't know, let's just say every time I played against it, it goes to shoot one of my vehicles and rolls a 1 no matter what, even if it requires 2s to hit. I've had this happen to me multiple times. Yes, I've had it happen to me using a Piat. If all else fails, it somehow manages to hit. It always rolls a 1, even if it's shooting at my rear armor, which has also happened multiple times. Wait, does this actually make it the best unit if my opponent has one? No, it's still shit.
Yeah, I think that sort of sums up the Pia.
Its range is small as well. It's 40 points on the regular for the two dudes, but it don't have many AT options for British outside of selecting an anti-tank gun or having a vehicle that's specified to do anti-tank duties. And I don't. It is interesting because with British vehicles, you do get that mixed profile. So the Cromwell has the medium anti-tank gun that does the 25-inch HE and whatever else. I actually take Piats because there's no other for the threat value. Not that they've ever done anything.
Yeah, I think there's because the thing is. And it's a bit, I don't want to sound controversial because obviously I have enough experience firing one or watching its effects go off, right? But certainly within bolt action, it has a bit of a useless reputation, where it's just not an effective anti-tank weapon. And I kind of get that, but at the same time, like what you were just saying, it's one of your only options. So would you rather have it and just give yourself at least some chance of doing it versus zero? And sure, okay, it's, you know, if it's just, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And I've had absolute horror stories where it doesn't. But the reality is, like, you don't have another option from really mounted anti-tank weapons. So,
and I was bringing up the fact that I tend that you know, the Cromwell has the mixed profile. There are anti-tank / howitzer guns for British that also do the same. So there is some versatility there, but typically, if I'm going to choose a howitzer versus an actual anti-tank gun, I'm going to pick a howitzer, and I'm going to find another option to do some AT work.
Even if it's not good. And you compare the Pier to something like an anti-tank rifle, and you go, okay, I can sort of see how that works. The range is a bit short, but I've got that better penetration. And if you somehow manage to get it shooting down, you know, 6 inches onto an enemy and get plunging fire, you beauty. But that's pretty rare.
61 points with a Jeep. So that's how you get the extra distance with it. And then, for comparison's sake, a Shrek is 80 points, and I think a Bazooka is 60, something like that. But the range is no good, and the pen's not really good. But and then there's other options you can take for Brits. You can take the
flamethrower, right? That's another option. There's like, because a flamethrower is shorter range to put it in a Jeep.
That's true. Okay. Let's have
Dean has a great.
Run me through why these are terrible.
So Dean's put the Soviet Airborne, and that's like, and we talked about this in our Soviet review, where they don't actually get any of the bonuses that any of the other units in the game do, despite them being arguably the first airborne, either division or brigade, that was pulled together historically.
But Soviets don't need stubborn, right?
Well, we go into that in the episode, and we say, you know, if they were stubborn as well as having their re-rolls, they become ridiculously good. And so it's sort of you're taking veterans who are already at 10s, and now you're giving them re-rolls and no negative modifiers, so your chance to actually fail those particular rolls is significantly reduced. And so I kind of understand why they haven't done it. That being said, it does mean they are completely misaligned with every other airborne or paratrooper style entry in the game. So I get how they maybe feel as bad over that space.
And then Luke's picked Ostrup, and he doesn't like Shirkers at all. I love them. I think they're great. Take 5.
I mean, the guy's talking. I was going to say, the guy's talking about, you know, massive big tanks as his favorite. So I'm not surprised that inexperienced little ants running around is not his thing.
Oh, that is awesome. And then the secret beast has already been unleashed. We've talked about our favorite vehicles, infantry, worst infantry. Yep. So we're going to be talking about worst vehicle now.
Yeah, we'll start with worst vehicles. So.
Hold on, before we go, we missed Gorchin's pick.
Did we?
Yeah,
we did.
He don't like MMGs. He says see the rulebook. That's his thoughts on it.
Coming from the guy who is like, I'm going to make MMGs work, and went to an event where we had some, admittedly, some rules that, you know, you got some victory points for MMGs or whatever. Won an event using MMGs, and then when we ask him what the worst unit is, he's like, MMGs hands down. Which I don't think, certainly from a competitive viewpoint, foot-mounted MMG teams are absolutely in that space of potentially the worst unit in the game for what you pay. So, and even making them inexperienced is not really much better. So I completely get that.
Yep. I understand. So
Now,
yes,
what
worst vehicle. Dan, hit us
worst
up.
vehicle.
What do you got?
So this one as well. I did it. What is the vehicle which I just never would consider taking? Like I can't find any reason to field it in this configuration whatsoever. And we've actually brought it up on the podcast before, and it's the American M12 motor carriage, which starts with a heavy howitzer, which is great, and it's like 185 points around there. And you can take 85 points off and get a heavy machine gun.
Perfect.
And it's just now it's actually to represent what they turned that gun carriage into, which was then a cargo transport with a heavy machine gun, called as an M30 cargo carrier. But my the part that I don't understand is
points.
You get 85 points off. Okay, that's fine. I kind of get that point. It's like, but what I put here is like, but you don't actually get any transport capacity for cargo or anything in it, and so you're losing your heavy howitzer. You can't put a tow in it. You can't put an artillery piece in it. You can't put a fixed weapon in it. You actually can't carry any equipment or a unit, and so it's basically a tank that made itself a transport without a transport.
Yeah,
and I'm like, if I'm going to talk about the worst thing,
this doesn't have a place.
I'm sure that there's a very minimal edge case where you could go, I'm running like a logistics platoon and I've got an M30 with an HMG. Oh, well, good for you. Enjoy getting airstriked, boy.
Yep, and my gripe is, again, reserve this just to Germans, which all of their vehicles are really good. Like, amazingly good. There are great options across the board. You can spend low and get really effective units. You can go in the mid-pack. There's some great options there. Heavy's too expensive, but it's also really cool and top tier as well. They're not going to die. Yeah. So Germans have, and they've got like the most options out there. There's like 60 vehicles or whatever. But yeah, my main gripe is the vehicle that they made the most of. This little guy. he ain't so great. It's just the, and we'll get into this in depth a little bit later, but it's the costing of this thing and why we can't use him. And that's basically because his other brother, P4,
it's
the same thing. 230 points for the Stu, 235 for a P4. Same weapon profile, same armor value, everything else. For 5 points less, you're turretless for the Stuke, and you lose target fear. So, I've seen some metrics out there with like a bolt action calculator on how a lot of these things get created. And there's a value for the armor, the weapon that's going on at the MGs and all that kind of stuff. And if you reverse engineer it and go back, there's a good approximation of what they've done to get most vehicles for balance across the board. It's not always correct, but like baseline, it's pretty close.
It's not bad.
And that makes sense with other armored vehicles of that type, but not turretless and losing special rules and whatever else. Fact is that there were lots of them, and the effective way to play them is to take the Hetzer.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the it's not only that it's 5 points less than a Panzer IV and loses those rules. It's also that a Hetzer now does the same thing but better anyway, and so it's minimized out from one boundary and maximized out from another boundary, but it actually doesn't sit within that boundary. Two other different vehicles do. The problem is I've got some ways I think that you could fix this, but then it starts impacting the Hetzer. So like if you do any kind of points reduction, then you got to start thinking about other things. There's always going to be that's the small wheel, big wheel impacts and things like that. But that's okay.
I can't take it basically, which is annoying. So I take it as the heavy howitzer, the medium howitzer variant, the Stu with an H. but that's not a Stug, and Stug is swag, and Stug H is Stug with an H, not swag.
So we did have of the responses that we got in very, very quickly. We had two of our players, Gorchin and one of the others, who were immediately like, Dagger Stewards, they're a problem.
Yeah.
For what you get, for what you pay,
Can I emphasize that this is the only part in Gorchin's post where he's written in all caps?
Capitals.
See the points cost. Yes, definitely.
Question mark, explanation mark. Yeah, and he's sort of we've talked about this before, like the Dagger Stewart pops up on virtually every podcast, not just ours as well. It's a known it's 100%. A known piece. So we might move past that into because it's a known. We'll move past that into Braden's one. Which Braden, he's got a really interesting. Yeah.
Why does
Renault
he like it?
If you see his reason that he's put.
Yeah, I'm just about to read it. Because I'm an Italian player and it's a French design. That I can take.
So the only reason that he's saying it's the worst tank is because it's not an Italian design and it's in his list. This is the sort of stuff where I really enjoy our community because they don't hesitate to give us like perfect content sort of creation stuff. It's like I don't like it because it's French and I'm meant to be Italian. That is that's just so good.
Yeah, so Nick isn't a fan of the Matildas, and he can't really see an option to actually take it within a game. I've faced them before because it seems to be one of the few tanks Australians can take.
Yeah, they can't take too many.
Yeah, they're not ideal. Yeah, but I mean, I get.
They're actually like, no, it's maybe not the worst, but it's at the same time, it's an infantry support tank that moves slow when you're wanting to start it from the point of bolt actions game when you're playing it. You're wanting something that if you've got machine guns, at least you want to be able to move more than like the 6 inches or whatever, so you can get them on angles of fire and get the range there. So. Yeah, I get that, and even if they like, I don't know with that one. Like, it's sort of a Australia fought with other vehicles, not just the Matilda. You know, and so there's other options that we could use, but the purpose of that one is it something that is it there just because it was historically present as opposed to being good?
Yeah, it's not all that interesting. All right, Kane. Let me have a read.
You did so good last time. Yeah, I'm just
the worst tank would have to be the M20 Scout car. Why on earth would you want to pay 80 points for just an HMVG? I'm never going to take it. Hey, I know I've used it and it has a spot in my heart. That doesn't mean it's good or it should be used, so don't use it, please. Emphasize with another don't.
What's great about this is like Kane writes the way that he speaks.
I know.
So like it
feels like I'm having a conversation with him.
You can see him just going, no, please, just don't. I know it's special, but don't.
Dean's not a fan of the Ostwind. Yeah, I mean, he's just saying like, let's just go for the verbal because it has 4 guns. Ostwind's basically the same variant of this.
Same as the drilling,
just has 1 light autocannon.
Yeah,
it's on a P4 chassis and everything else. Take a drilling. It's about the same points as an Ostwind. So
I think that's a very fair point. Like if you're going again, unless you're building for theme or whatever, like if you go into the effort of like, I like the idea of autocannons on a vehicle, and it's like, well, you either go all out or you go the middle range, which is actually on the half track, and you get the drilling. But sort of one feels a bit and then Luke has got his last piece that he's put forward, the worst tank and why. probably stuff like the Sextant or the rear open-topped anti-tank gun, which is a little bit, sort of wacky and cursed, but kind of terrible. And so he's talking about things like, so the Sextant was essentially, wasn't much bigger than it might have been a little bit more bigger than a Bren carrier. I think it was a bit more than a Bren, sort of more like a smaller cut-down version of an M7 Priest, I think. Self-propelled guns. Lots of different self-propelled gun types sort of fit in that box on tracks with a gun. Martyrs are sort of in that space as well. The rear open-topped anti-tank gun, so he's talking about the 2-pound porties that were running around on literally strapped to the bolts to the back of trucks. I actually think those were designed for a purpose and were very good at that purpose. You can't really reflect that purpose in bolt action that much. Because, and not to mention, and I'll touch on this in a second.
Like it's meant to be ambush and then run away direct.
That's it. Yeah. And it's kind of like, bolt action doesn't currently work like that, so you can't really fulfill that purpose.
There is another British tank that's the same design as well. It's completely skipped my mind of what it's called, but it's a massive tank, and it also has the same rule where it's shooting from the reverse, so you're moving forward at 4.5. Because you should be moving backwards. That's what it's meant to do. Yeah. Cool. So, I mean, we've gone through all our kind of unit choices, some info, and then obviously some of the community that we've reached out to in Perth. So let us know what.
Thank you to everyone, by the way, for jumping on and doing that.
Yeah, and last minute as well. Like we put this call out about half an hour before we start the show, so that was great for everybody to give their input.
We've actually we've got 2 more that have come in actually.
I chucked in Luke's and Dean.
Yeah, we got Chris.
Oh yeah, we do have Chris.
We've got 2 more.
It's just in between. It's just in between posts.
Look at our community. Look at our community.
All right, let me copy and paste Chris into our chat so we can put it all together. Oh, you've already done it for me.
Yeah, I've done this one.
All right.
So while you grab the next one,
I don't see the other one.
I'll get it. I'll get the next one.
Cool, sweet. Well, I'll start with Chris. So Chris, a friend of the show, me and him won Dueling Aces together. Very rare that I've actually been on the team with Chris. He's very, very good opponent. And he's the one who's kind of trained me to get better at bolt. And he's
done well.
Excellent at Soviets. And he's picked exactly what I hate. Free rifle squad. By far my highest performing unit that I ever have. 100% Chris. Freaking hate that thing. Yes, I've seen it delete tanks all over. Whether I'm against it or not, it's a great unit.
It's so good.
Perfect pick. And I'm just going to go one after the other with this guy because I know him so
go
well.
for it.
Favorite tank, and this thing won Dueling Aces for us. It was amazing. The T-35, completely unexpected with the points cost that we had for the force. But we got luck with this thing all over, and it just happened to be terrain for the most part because there was roads everywhere. This thing has a huge footprint, which means it actually doesn't move all that far.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's got several guns all over. It's turrets galore. I think it's got 3 or 4 turrets on it, and multiple machine guns, like a light howitzer, a medium anti-tank gun, all this kind of crazy stuff.
Watching you guys pilot that T-35 during Dueling Aces, I was expecting to come over to literally any of the tables and be like, oh yeah, the T-35 died, of course, because it's this giant mammoth thing that you're putting on a small board. And didn't it survive like almost every game?
Every game, except for there was one where it was actually his home board that he made. It was this city that was circled around with this paved roads and that kind of stuff. And he just got stupid aggressive with it because it had already killed so much stuff, and it was like next to a Hellcat. So like it was bound to happen. But yes, great pick, Chris. Just keep running this tank. It's amazing. Worst. And everything listed here is Soviet, which makes perfect sense for how I interpreted favorite versus worst, what you like using. Worst veteran at SMG squad, too expensive, underperforming compared to other army vets. So I guess he means he's had a lot of experience of facing me with vets. So I think that his thought process is Germans or other nations, just because there's just different options that those squads can take. So worst might mean the worst option for him and his play style. More so 100%. Than like competitive, whatever else. Worst tank. You have to find one I don't like, but the KV2 has performed the worst thus far. And
I got to say, as a way to answer that question of like, I haven't really found the one that I don't like yet. This one didn't really perform as good as the others, and it's like, yeah, but you're still saying it performed, right? Like, The KV2 is the box on treads. It's that thing is quite heavy howitzer. The biggest thing is you can take that during what are typically the early war years, where
if
people just
can't penetrate it,
can't crack the 10+ summer, and that's where it really shines, because you can just take hit after hit and you just don't care, and then you land a heavy howitzer shot. Where it comes to the other bits and pieces, I think there certainly are some tanks that I could point him to in the Soviet list that I would go, I don't know if that's the best.
Yeah,
but Soviets are they're spoiled for choice. They got a lot of
some good
stuff.
options, and he does typically not go for a tank. He's favoured the Katusha a lot, and then he loves taking that Gaz infantry truck thing. Yeah. So I've actually rarely seen him with a typical T-34 or an SU. He's always trying some stuff. But I mean that coming off that game with T-35, I can't see why you wouldn't pick that. That's just amazing.
I was, in some ways it made me happy because someone got to play with a tank that they enjoyed and actually did really well. And in some ways I was just like, I can't believe you weren't punished for bringing a T-35. So the one that I thought was there was actually a duplicate. I've misread the post. No problem. We're all good to move forward now.
Nice. So obviously we talk about infantry, tanks, good and bad, what we like, what we don't, all that kind of stuff. Let us know in the comments what you kind of think on those, either what we've chose or what you personally think or feel. Completely different perspective than what we have or what the community's had. That's great. In particular, if you are even not from Perth, we'd love to hear what you think is good, to give us some perspective on what other people think and feel with this game. The other thing that we kind of propose to everybody is, in the dream scenario, if there was like a rule that you could change, an idea that you could implement.
A rule that you could change, or an idea or a rule that you could add. And so this, we tried to say very clearly, is like one, because obviously whenever you generate these sorts of lists, every person wants to put in top 5 changes, top 3 changes I'd make. And so what we might do is we'll actually talk through everyone else's points first, and then you and I can circle back.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to start. I'm going to start with the funny one to begin with, and that's Gorchins. And he reads,
and only in jest.
And he reads, and listen to this. Dear Warlord, sort yourself out, please.
Now, of course, when we read that, we laughed hysterically. And the only thing that we would say is, it's in the same post, obviously, as his other points, which is, Marines are good, have everything, Shermans are pretty, MMG, see the rule book, Stuart, see the points cost. And so,
take it all together as a package, right?
Take it all together. Yeah. It is a bit of a jest, but it is sort of a, hey, this is wonky, can rate it out.
So if we go to Jackson. His suggestion is that he'd like to see HE move back to the version 1 without templates. I think that would speed up the game quite a bit, because I always find that like people are disagreeing on what is and isn't under the template, all that kind of stuff.
It's a good efficiency thing. I'm a little bit torn, right? Because so I see it in two different ways. So if you go with, there's two examples. You either go, okay, I've got a really big template on a really small unit. I'm going to max out at 2 hits because there's 2 models. Okay, great, fantastic. Whether you are, whether you're using a big template or a small template, there's 2 models. I'm going to get 2. You're going to potentially get forced down. That's okay. When you revert that to a D6, you can end up in a space where you go, well, I've generated 6 hits and there's actually no maximum, like when a vehicle explodes. And so these guys are just going to take 6 hits, like they're dead. That always sort of strikes a little wrong. If it's a big enough explosion, it kind of makes sense. But if it's a small one and then you over damage like a 1-inch HE and somehow manage to get 3 hits off 2 models, you're like, well, how does that work? So I get why they went to templates to try and minimize that. However, I think there's a bit of a compromise that you could reach between the 2 positions. So go back to D6 roll conversions and simply put minimums. Like you can never have more hits than the maximum number of models in the unit. I can't recall if that was actually in version 1 or not. It might have been. I don't recall it being there. But then you run into, you are now in the position of where you could have a big pie template blast marker on a unit of 10 models in the open, and you only roll the 1 on the D6. And now you're suddenly like, well, I should be getting at least 4 or 5 models there. Why am I only getting 1? Because I've got a big explosion. And so that's when I'm like, it's a bit hard. Like this was done to attempt to, make this sort of work a bit better. And so you avoid one problem. And unfortunately, it represents it in another way. So what is the answer? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think moving back to a refined version of where it's dicing off for hits, I mean, that's where 40K went after using blast markers forever and a day. They went to D6 rolls. And then ironically, just before that, bolt action had gone away from D6 rolls into templates. And so they sort of shifted positions a little bit. I also think specifically, if you're going to use templates, you should probably go to the effort of measuring scatter. And that's actually a time-consuming piece of the game to put in, because you can have it scatter and still hit models if you miss, for example. And I'm not necessarily talking about a scatter die like in 40K. You could be, if you miss your hit by a percentage or like 1-2 result, you're 2 or 3 inches back from your target point, and so you might still hit something. You've just missed your shot. You might hit a completely different unit because you were aiming too low. But of course, that absolutely adds time. So even though you're tracking missed shots and you might get some more bang for buck in some way, it's tracking more. So I don't mind templates. I think because you have to, it forces you to maximize the number of hits whenever you hit something. That speeds it up a little bit because you basically go, oh, well, I think it could be, it's definitely 6, it could be 7. There is no, it could be 7. If you're able to touch it, if you're able to touch it, it's 7. And that's where it's kind of like, I think some people bring the Games Workshop argumentative of they're in, they're out. They bring that into the game when it's not actually written there.
Yep.
So but of course, if you're dealing with a hang up of another game system, maybe it is just easier to switch away from it again and just go back to D6 rolls, limit to number of unit. Of course, if you limit it to the number of models in a unit, you can then deliberately have a 2-man unit stump in front of a heavy howitzer, get hit and survive. So, it is. I don't know if it's as clear cut necessarily, but do I think it's a good idea to potentially go back with some refinement? Yeah, I think so. But I don't mind templates either.
We'll go to Braden's pick. Rule I would like to add: adjust the smoke rule to allow direct fire accuracy and/or to make the scatter a random dice direction and not the enemy's chosen direction. Yeah. I like the randomness to it and not just the enemy picking what would be ideal for them.
It's I really struggle to understand why they went this way with smoke, because smoke used to be that you put it on the target spot or target unit that you want, and if you failed, like it's scattered or whatever. And then when they changed it to an enemy would place it, and that you can place it within 12 inches, it made it so like this is just not worth taking anymore.
Yeah.
Does smoke need to be accurate? I don't think smoke should be accurate because it's just drifting in the wind and stuff. However, you could relatively accurately lay down smoke screens, and so it doesn't feel right that you can miss it by 12 inches in a direction you weren't even aiming.
Yeah.
So I do think that a refined to smoke rules would be good, and I think I'd like to see that, and not just because all my soldiering on of smoke is not as horrible as people think. It's not great, but it's not as horrible. I might get some justification if they change that rule.
Yeah, and Nick's touched on the probably most popular point that you see anywhere where people are shouting for a V3, and that is, what do we do with MGs? How do we make them better? And the argument can go on for centuries of do we add more pins? Do we give it more shots? Do we make them cost less? For a long time, I'd landed on let's just take the K47 method, which is I think it's D2. But then what do you do with Dacre Stewarts?
Yeah, exactly.
What I mean? So I think there's a lot of suggestions on how to improve machine guns from the point of view of it being an MMG or an LMG. But then a lot of those things don't fix what they're like on a vehicle.
That's right, and that is the classic. Yeah, that's what it's turned into. Suggestion of sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, my opinion is take something less drastic and just reduce the points slightly.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I've come to. Actually, that's not true. I've come to a consensus on what I think would fix part of the problem, because MGs in and of themselves are actually not a problem until they're put on vehicles. So now, if we're talking about the effect of a machine gun and what they were used for, and that's starting to go where Nick's comment was, so it's add more pins to the MG. I don't actually disagree with that. I think that's something that machine guns would be, especially because pins are so critical in bolt action, you would really see the machine gun become a more
an
effective
auto take
weapon.
As well. So
a bit more of an auto take, putting those sort of...
it would drastically change the game.
Yeah, because all of a sudden you can actually go, right, well, if I hit you, I can now lock you in on some pins and some damage.
Now I have small arms or a non-template weapon that can generate more pins. Why don't I maximize on that across the board? Especially if you're German.
Because it'll be cheap.
Or if it shoots
cheaper, right?
I mean, it's a fine line to figure
but
out.
Even when you follow through and you go, right, if we're moving into trying to use MGs for more suppressive fire, where you're basically shooting into a beaten zone to try and keep them locked in while you're maneuvering around or whatever. It's like, okay, so you've got Soviets that ran dual machine gun squads to run around in their different fire teams and all this. You could go to that level. I do think this isn't based on anything at all, just to be absolutely clear. I do think we will see a change of some degree to machine guns in version 3.
It's too vocal on this point. People have been talking about it from the beginning.
Yeah.
They want to change. So you would imagine that it would be one of the points of changing to a new version. It will significantly change the game, though.
Yeah. I think Kane's point, which is then one rule that I would add, is that indirect fire HE shells, if they miss, they don't just enter the shadow realm and disappear. They actually scatter and land somewhere random around the target, like a spotting round would do in the real world. And that sort of ties back into what we were talking about earlier. And 100% I'm with him on that. I think if you're going to go to the effort of just doing it with a template, especially with a template, and you're going to do an indirect shot, you really should be going, well, at least know how to get somewhere near the target, right? So it should be landing somewhere around there. Adds more time, less abstraction, a bit more realism, maybe, one of the things we love about bolt action though is it's typically simple and quick to play through. So that's always a factor that needs to sit on those pieces. But I would agree. I think if you're going to keep templates in, potentially crack at least in an abstract way a bit more of where those rounds land in case there was danger close.
Dean's touched on MMGs again, but this time he's added, why won't we do indirect fire with MMGs? British perfected it and laid waste to towns with non-stop lead. Make MMGs great again.
A different way to potentially to do
hitting on sixes, right?
Yeah, hitting on sixes, long range. But I mean, you take a medium machine gun and say you're going to fire out of line sight in direct 6 inches. I mean, okay.
Yeah.
Out to 36 inches. I think that idea would need a bit of work to understand how you could implement it safely.
Yeah.
Because of course, you would have to say only applicable to foot-mounted MGs and not now.
100%.
Dakar tanks suddenly just going, hey, we're just going to shoot over the other side of the board. We can't see, no dramas.
I'll probably throw that to sevens, to be honest.
Yeah, just for
sixes. Because there's so many situations where you're shooting long range in a hard cover as it is.
Correct.
And then you've all of a sudden got an option that's just as good as, that doesn't really matter with terrain and whatever else. So maybe sevens, or maybe another way to look at it is like maybe this thing can only inflict a pin.
Yeah,
it could be an option.
It's and that's I think it's an interesting idea, something to maybe flesh out. But quite interesting.
Luke, here we go. There's one rule I could add to BA. What would it be? Make heavy tanks more viable. Either like 2 shots a turn or something. I don't know. So 2 actions a turn would be cool.
I mean, but the funny thing, that doesn't... Look, I get what he's saying.
Okay, a mouse, maybe give that 2 activations.
Well, because the thing is, right, so tanks operated by their crew. So by giving them 2 actions, you're essentially saying that the crew can work twice as hard as an infantry squad in the field, right? And that's potentially not true. One of the ways you could do it is completely overhaul the vehicle point systems. Like completely overhaul those and change those up to make heavy tanks more viable from a points point of view. And so that might be that you have some sort of cap in the vehicle point builder where you go past this point. It doesn't matter how big your armor is. It doesn't matter how big your gun is. Like you cap out at this many points.
Yeah, because you can go like over 700 on a vehicle, right? And then there are tanks around the 400 to 500 mark that are just technically just as good for the most part.
Yeah.
So
that's right. Like
maybe some hard cap really does make sense.
Yeah.
Between terrible options.
Between terrible options. So, the 2 shots a turn. That's an interesting one. Because if you took this, you could either do 2 separate actions a turn and therefore 2 shots at 2 different targets, or you could do simply 2 shots a turn at the
same target. Can't do anything else. Yeah.
And I don't know how I feel about that necessarily either.
Me either.
But of course, if you do that for tanks, there's also justification that you would then do that for a fixed anti-tank gun, and suddenly a fixed anti-tank gun starts looking a bit more attractive because you're getting 2 rounds through the breech. Possibly.
It's interesting though, because do you take a heavy tank that can shoot twice, or 2 medium tanks that are still cheaper?
Well, and that's and that sort of logic is exactly where I went straight away to go. I don't know if it's worth it. Well, you can't make them shoot 3 times a turn. So I don't know if that's necessarily. But making them more viable so people are willing to play with them and that they feel like they're not just a point sink, I actually think that's a good idea.
then Braden's also talked about, an extra pin as a house rule for MGs.
Yes.
And Chris has also said the same, add a rule that MGs and LMGs cause more prints.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's what everybody wants. I just don't know how to do it right.
And I suppose that's one of the challenges Warlord has at the moment is there is no right. There is only try. Like when they put Tiger Fear in, they did it on, okay, this is a rule we think is going to work. It got a whole host of feedback from different things. They adjusted it, feedback adjusted, and then they got to a point where they're like, right, we adjusted too far, and yes, it was a problem that way, so now we're just going to settle here. The machine guns might end up in that sort of a space where we get, this is your version 3 machine gun. Oh, it turns out that was a little bit too good because they were so bad. Mm-hmm. And so now we're going to have to tune them a little bit. Oh, we made them so bad again. Right, well, we're going to take that away. It might be something like that. So, but it's whatever they release, it's probably going to be 6 to 12 months worth of the world playing with it to really get under the hood.
They've actually figured out how this works. Yeah.
Because you've got to remember that, like the guys at Warlord Games, like they play lots of games and stuff, but their job isn't to necessarily play test. They actually rely on the people, either designing the games to do that play testing, or when it hits the market, that's when you get your best play testing because people buy in and then tell you, I don't feel like I've got my money's worth. And that's actually the best feedback, right? It's always at the time after, but that's, whatever.
So what did you piece together?
Okay, so I have two. I have one that
I'm surprised.
Yeah,
I'm actually really surprised because you tend to really don't want to actually mix with the formula when you've had any of these discussions because there's other packs out there that manipulate the game quite significantly, and you're very much vanilla is good. There's a reason it's written this way.
Correct. So these ones I thought pretty hard about on the basis of what do I think would improve the game outside of the known pieces, like so machine guns are an obvious one. And one of the ways I would deal with machine guns is right. So what is the real problem with machine guns? Because when you put machine guns on foot, everyone thinks they're terrible. As soon as you put them onto a vehicle, they're amazing. So the problem is actually that you put them onto a vehicle. And why is it a problem when they're on a vehicle? Well, because the entire crew of the vehicle is able to shoot every weapon every turn. Mm-hmm. And so my first adaptation that I would recommend is putting a hard limit where vehicles can only fire 3 weapons a turn.
Yeah.
Hard limit. You are restricted to, you can have as many weapon systems as you want, but you can only fire 3. And then that just Dagger Stewarts, well, guess what? You're just the same as a Panzer IV-E with the 3 machine guns now.
Yeah.
You're exactly the same. A Lee Grant can still fire its full complement of weapons, providing you don't take a pintle. Most of the other tanks still fire, most of the other vehicles in the game can still fire all of their weapons without any problems at all.
Sorry, Chris.
And you severely cap out on the Dagger Stewart's problem. You still run your Brendan Carrier spam, no issues there. You've got 2 light machine guns, go for your life. Like, that's fine. You want to go to 5 machine guns off 1 unit? No, not going to happen. The other one, and this is probably the one that I think, the more that I think about it, the more that I would like to see in Bolt Action version 3, if and whenever that comes out. I don't know if it'll make it in, but I'll get to it anyway. So one of the things that makes Bolt Action nice and fun is the fact that it's casual and there's an element of predictability about it. So when someone's doing an advance order, they're going to move and they're going to shoot. Mm-hmm. And that it is in that very specific order. So one of the best ways to potentially change up how Bolt Action plays and how it interacts with your strategies and how to play is to simply say, on an advance order, you can either move and then shoot, or you can shoot and then move. Now, on the surface, that's like when you're trying to apply your current understanding of how bolt action works, that sort of doesn't gel, because then you're like, well, that doesn't make sense, because I would have just moved and now I'm not in a position to shoot, which is why I move out and take the shot. And it's like, that's true. But what it does is change up. Like, you can now actually set up those rear shot porty ambushes.
Yeah.
Because you can take the shot and then just get out of there. And you can always have it as the option, so you can position yourself the normal way that we would. And if you find that you're getting outflanked, you can react by pulling away, but still getting a shot off as you disengage. And the way things work is you'll be shooting and potentially holding up your enemy a little bit and giving yourself time to back away. And suddenly the whole game plays differently. You get a whole different set of tactical options in that space. So
I would have liked Recce to be this.
Yes. Yep.
And yeah, I played other game systems that do that. You can choose which way you want to do the movement and shooting and all that kind of stuff, and then that becomes a decision point in the game. I think it's for efficiency that it's not there. I think it makes the game faster, but
yeah, undoubtedly.
I think it makes it way more interesting if you do have it.
Yeah, I think it just, and that's what I mean. Like, if it completely depends on what Warlord Games wants to do. If they simply want to do a revision of the rules and a tidy up and we don't want to mess with what works, but we are going to tidy up some of these pieces. They may not even want to recost certain things. They may not ever release second or third edition army books. They might just leave all those other pieces as they are and just work and tweak with the mechanics, because they go, you know what? It's actually not broken. It's broken because people are taking this and this and this and this and putting it together and saying that's how it works. So we're going to cut boundaries as to where you can do that to make it the game the way it's intended, and then do what you want. We don't care after that. Go have fun. Like, the point is to go have fun. But if they wanted to, in my opinion, compete more strongly with modern day war games that are coming out, and some of the brilliant war games that are coming out from the likes of Marvel Crisis Protocol and some of the other interactions, where they've got great looking models, they've got great followings, they've got some pretty full-on rules. If you want to compete into that market, you actually have to have to add some complexity to your rules. Keeping virtually everything the same, you could change that movement order and you have a different game. You have a very different game. Recce interacts completely differently, because now I'm going to shoot at you and force you to run away before I now get to advance. So I can force you to run away with Recce and then take the position of the field, as opposed to move in and then waste my shot. So that changes the value of Recce units. And you might actually start seeing Recce units Recce. Like, use their reconnaissance ability rather than an escape reaction. And their reconnaissance ability might allow you to do something else. Speculating now.
In your mind with this, does your unit take the negative for advance regardless of if it's standing to fire then moving?
So that is my second part. So I would say if you are shooting first and then you are mobilizing, that you do not suffer the -1.
Then why doesn't everybody do that, right?
Well, it comes with a.
Obviously, there's some movement and trying to get closer and all that kind of stuff. But
if I was gonna remove the -1 for firing in that move and advance element, Americans aside for a second, I'd also have to fiddle with the fire order. I don't want to do that. So yes, they would have to take the negative.
Yeah, I think you get the penalty regardless.
Yeah, because you're taking it from an advance order, ergo you're going to get the penalty. But even with that,
it's so strong. Yeah, it is. It's really cool.
It's just slightly different, and it might be slightly different enough to keep it in that sphere where someone comes across and goes, I want to be able to do whatever I want with my units. Well, you pretty much can. It's just that certain decisions are going to be better than others. And timing also becomes very critical on how you engage, which it depends if they want that sort of an evolution. If they don't, it's all good.
Yeah.
Put
Look,
a
I'm
hard
here
limit
either
3.
way, but
Yeah.
I think it'd be really good if they've actually had a thought about this one in particular. I think that adds more longevity with the
Yes.
culture of gamers outside of the ones who currently play Bolt. I think that would entice people to try it.
Yeah, and especially if you put vehicle spam wagons are a problem. Great, we'll throw a limit on those, and we want to do something subtle but critical to continue the life of the game because the game will play differently. Well, we're going to change the way the advanced order works, but basically it's exactly the same, except now you can swap the order of the action. Yep. And then straight away you have a different game at that point.
And then how would you get it to interact with an ambush? If the person selected to advance at any point, does the ambusher get to fire back? So could it fire back at the unit that's standing and shooting and then moving away?
You just do it exactly the same. You just do it based on the model moving. Because
because you get to then shoot the ambusher and cause a pin or kill first and then move and then trigger the ambush. It's now a negative to be ambushing.
Yes, it could be. Yeah. And that would have to now be part of the new decision matrix. So ambush no longer becomes a sure thing. And so you have to use your ambushes more craftily. So, for example, the Finns, suddenly they're shooting back on even odds rather than plus ones.
Yeah.
And their ambushes are not maybe as effective, which I don't think you'll find a lot of Finnish players upset by that. You won't find many players who don't play Finns upset by that.
Yeah.
Because that leveraging of a current mechanic at the moment is very, very strong. And so, I'm not saying that's the perfect answer, but I am saying
it's a great idea.
It makes it a different game. And so, and it's well within the realms of, fire and maneuver.
Yeah.
It's suppress and then you pivot. And so, I don't know. It's something I've been mulling over for a while, thinking I reckon there's a use case where it could be made to work.
Yeah.
And it's just plotting out, if we did do that, like with ambush, like with recce, where are all those interactions that pick it up? But think about this, like one of the things that you could do, I'm trying to think, is you have a unit around the side of a building, and normally we would have to move those out to take shots at anything that goes on.
Yeah.
That interaction is not changed. You still have to do the move out and you still have to do the shooting afterwards. The difference would be now that you potentially could instead, if you were caught on the side of the building, instead of just running away and maybe getting a couple of shots, you can do a shot to disengage and run around the side of the building. And that's where I think, it's I think there's some opportunity there that could be done. But
really good answer, Dan. I'm impressed. This is a good idea. I mean, it's in lots of other game systems and stuff, but it does actually quite change the formula of Bolt for it. So. Oh, that's good. Well, mine sounds terrible in comparison, but we'll go with it because I did it, and it is a bugbear of mine anyway. I mean, I didn't touch the MMG thing because I didn't know how to do it. But another thing to consider, however you find a way to do it, would be great. And I've picked a mild suggestion on how to fix it. But I've also had a lot of crazy other ideas in my head as other ways. So basically, tank destroyers in total in bolt action just seem like a wasted opportunity thematically. So we brought up Mr. Stug 5 points less, and he has to advance to engage any target that he can't see in his front arc. So I just think the costing of the points doesn't make sense to take him, and a lot of other tank destroyers as well. So how do we fix them? And I'm in the camp of, I think mild points reductions is the way to fix problems people have, rather than implementing extra rules. So I think the solution for MMGs and LMGs in my head that makes sense is they're just got to be slightly less points and keep everything else the same. I think it's a points efficiency thing more than anything else, and we don't need to implement anything else, because then that has impact on choices. Now we have a unit that can do multiple pins that couldn't, so now it's an auto include for everything and whatever else. So with how it fits in the game, I think MMGs, you reduce the points. I think with tank destroyers, you also reduce the points. But to what level, I don't know. I think 5 points is in that realm of it doesn't matter. Somewhere within that 10 to 20 points makes sense to me. But then you got to start taking some considerations for the lighter costed vehicles in that category as well. Hetz's 210, then it becomes 190 if you do that. And then that's now becoming in the realms of auto include, almost. So I don't actually know what to do. And then I thought of some wild ideas, and probably the way to fix them is actually to do exactly what you've said, which is this idea of being able to shoot and then move in advance. In my mind, before you brought that up, my idea was maybe tank destroyers have a special rule that they ignore the penalty for long range. Because that kind of, from an ambush fire actually, not for an advance or anything else, because that would fit within the flavor of what they were, which would be these ambushing units and things that, it's not a +1 to hit. It's just from ambush, remove the long range penalty. It's like it's halfway there, but not going too far where all of a sudden now you just take tank destroyers all the time. Just an idea. The other thing I was thinking about that might be interesting to implement, but I haven't written it here, is that we have a regular movement speed for vehicles, for tanks, which is a 9. There's a slow, but there's not a fast. And a fast would be pretty cool for, and basically my idea would just be replicate the wheeled option, which is 12 inches of movement. That would be cool for a vehicle like a Hellcat. Might be an idea for a special rule rather than a category of tank or whatever else, and I would say you pay points for it. Those are my kind of ideas of things that I might change, but they're not as well thought out as you. Yours actually changes the mechanic of the game, and I've been on that wavelength for a long time where you say vanilla is good, and I agree. So I don't necessarily want to dramatically change the game. I don't know what the right thing is for the future of this. For a long time I've thought like you and said, this is really good as it is. We don't actually need to change anything. But does that keep it relevant? You keep it relevant for me. I'm not going to stop playing. But I don't want it to disappear.
That's right, and that's where I started going with my with that point on potentially changing the mechanic. I was using that question to go, it's all great for them to do, the fixes that we want and the amendments that we want to align whatever, and aligning it may find other things and they could amend that and do that, but will that ultimately lead to rule stagnation because the game itself think that the game itself will never change too much? It should be noted that historical systems don't normally change editions. They only ever, traditionally, there's a few exceptions to updating their rules after significant amounts of times or needing to fix drastic errors. But most of the time, they run erratas and FAQs just to maintain the rule set as it is, and they go, you take it or leave it. It is what it is. Move
and have
on.
some extra campaign books for another theater and that kind of stuff. That seems to be the typical route for a historical game.
Yep. And so if they want to, and the benefit of that obviously is it's a lower maintenance curve to keep it going in that space. And if that's where, Warlord decides with whatever product research they're doing that, for where we are, for what we need, Bolt Auction's doing fine. It's getting good. Like it's overall, it is still actually a phenomenal system and a great way to play some casual games. And it can be, with a little bit of tweaking, it actually can be done at a competitive level. Like, do we risk ruining that by introducing something like what I've suggested, which might drastically upset the apple cart? It's something to be, needs to be play tested before you roll it out as part of a rulebook. As opposed to something like D2 pins on machine guns, that's something which you could, on foot-based machine guns, that's something you could potentially implement through an FAQ errata now and just simply say, machine gun foot teams now generate D2 pins instead of one, or whatever option is chosen in that space. Just the same as for the vehicles, you could simply include an errata statement to go, as of now, systems. Yeah, 3 fire systems, that's all you're getting. And suddenly, Dagger Stewards aren't a thing anymore. Now, whether any of those things are the right things, we obviously don't know. But I am sort of in the same boat with you. I like vanilla, and I don't particularly want to introduce more stuff which may simply find a way to break what I already love. But there is a part of me that goes, if you keep it too simple forever, the reality is that you may never get the people looking for the slightly more complex, which they don't have to be your target audience, but they're also not that far away if you did want to get them. But yeah.
So just a big thank you to everybody that contributed at the last minute for getting us some answers. I can see on the Discord that Nick McDonald's been trying to write a reply on the Bolt Action thread, so he may have some answers, but I don't think we're going to get them today. Appreciate your help, guys. So it was Luke, Dean, Braden, Chris, we had Nick, we had Kane, and I think that's everybody who contributed. Obviously, Gorchin as well. Yeah. Do let us know. Best unit. Favorite infantry, favorite tank, worst infantry, worst tank. And if there was something that you could change within Bolt Action that you think that everybody would magically just agree on and just accept, and this is how it's going to be, do let us know what you think it could be. Obviously, machine guns is a huge topic for everybody. But yeah, if there's any kind of suggestions in or outside the box, something from another game system that you really like, mechanic, or if you just think it's just points tweaking or whatever else, do let us know. We'd love to do a follow-up on this. And if you like this kind of stuff, do let us know again, because it is different from our regular recordings. So we want to know if it's worth the time to do it. It's fun for us, but if you enjoy it, then let us know and we can do more stuff like this. You can catch us Western Tabletop on YouTube. You can also find us all over on all the podcast apps under HMG Podcast. You can find us on Facebook, all of that. If you're in Perth, come say hello to us if you see us at an event. If we don't know who you are, we're very friendly, accommodating, and we'd love to play more Bolt and meet more people who do play Bolt. So thanks for your time tonight, Dan. Thank
you very much.
I think that'll be it, and we'll catch up again soon.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks very much, everyone.
Welcome back, guys. We're just going to add this right in at the end. One of our viewers has added in his comments just as we ended the show. So we're going to thank Nick McDonald for contributing to this special episode as well. I'm going to read through his choices. So for his favorite infantry, he's gone ahead and picked the regular US Engineer Squad. Can be tailored to fit any list. Multiples can be taken and fits into a Dodge truck. It is a good option. For a long time, there weren't. Usually it's veteran pioneers and that kind of thing. So regular is cool. It's now filtered into a lot of armies these days. You can get regular engineers and that kind of stuff. So yeah, good pick, Nick. We'll skim through to get this done nice and quick because it is late. But why don't you read the worst one for me?
Sorry, I was laughing. The worst infantry, and then we have Indian Gurkha Maori paratroopers. That's obviously a bit of a meme. I know there's no such thing, but it tends to be the hard stick by which everything is measured. And in that aspect, he's absolutely right. It's sort of like the horror combination of things that go together and making them stubborn as paratroopers, I think, as well. It's like, come on.
So he's picked his favorite as the M5 Stuart for his tank. So that's cool. And then worst tank, any mythical tank that never really saw actual combat but has poorly written rules that makes them way overpowered.
That feels like essentially the prototype tank-esque things that never really were involved but have come forward.
Kubo shouldn't exist. There's three of them. We don't know if they saw combat.
No.
Maybe. And then some of his gripes about rules. He's written a few, but it's just all kind of rushed. He's not a fan of how prep bombardment works, how multi-launchers work, and he's not a fan of the free unit spam stuff like free RD Observer, free Soviet infantry squad, and all that kind of stuff. When you put it in comparison to national rules for other nations, I can see where it's a gripe, but it needs to be taken as an overall approach of that nation as well. But it does feel a little bit crappy when there's a points cost involved of a free unit.
Yes, I think there's
a difference in the list.
I think there's some good points. I think the way that a prep bombardment works, I would agree with that. I think there's potentially a simpler way to demonstrate a similar effect, and that could be anything from you simply roll to see if it comes in, and then if it comes in, every unit gets a pin, like just a single pin. And it's because I find that if you have, and I've played games where you can have a really good set of rolls on a critical area of the battlefield with all those units take like 3 pins, and that just is debilitating for your opponent. Like they spend the first turn rallying, you've spent the first turn positioning, and now you just keep them in that section of the board. Multiple launches, take them or leave them. Imagine if multiple launchers went back to the D6 rolls instead of the templates, I think they would be significantly less effective. And so that would also potentially fix that problem. And spamming of free units is absolutely a fair comment.
Yep. So cheers for the last minute feedback there, Nick. That was awesome. We can go back to our exit. Have a great night.
See you later, everyone.